Training camps are open, and the puck is about to drop on the upcoming NHL and fantasy hockey seasons. And that's why you're tapped right back into your daily source for everything you need to dominate your upcoming drafts. It's the Monday edition of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Mock Draft Monday 4.0, baby. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome back inside the lab, your daily source for fantasy hockey. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, joined, as always, by my esteemed co-host, Mr. Steel Roden. On this side of the microphone, it's your boy, Big Flip Livingstone. Shout out to the everydayers. Salute. Thank you so much for holding us down every single day, making us your first listen every single day. Right now, Steel, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Place a $5 bet on FanDuel to get started, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Mr. Roden, it's getting very serious at this time of year. Football in full swing, basketball coming back, and of course, and most importantly, fantasy hockey draft season, baby. We got listener league news coming up on tomorrow's episode. We'll talk about all the details. All the invites have been sent. And oh, baby, we got our latest mock draft Monday. Let's tee it up quickly, and I'll turn it over to you. I'm in the 5th spot. You're in the 8th spot. This is a 12-team league, 2 centers, 2 left wing, 2 right wing, 4D, 2 goaltenders. How we usually do it, Steel. We're looking at categorical style leagues. That's what we do, baby. And I know I'm fired up for fantasy season. I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm ready to go.
I'm fired up. Like you said, the fantasy listener leagues have been finalized. Everyone has joined in the competitive league. We're still waiting on a few more in the casual league. So if you are one of those lucky participants, make sure you join the league before the draft date so we can get everything finalized, draft date, time, everything that works best for everybody in the league. So if you got an email, make sure you're tuning in and joining in as fast as possible. We really do appreciate that. But very excited. Of course, we're excited for big time bets to come back at the end of every single segment on this podcast. So we're excited. The bets have already been flowing in the NFL, but we're going to get them over into the National Hockey League very, very soon indeed. But look, we're excited for it. We're happy that this is going for our 3rd season. And again, we couldn't be more pumped about this upcoming year.
Realistically, at this point of draft prep, research, you almost get a little bit fatigued because I know I'll speak for myself, Steel. I feel like we've been rehashing, re-breaking down kind of a lot of the same angles, talking about a lot of the same players here. And I'm obviously not going to speak for you, but I am starting to find that I need to actually do a couple of drafts. I know mock drafts are helpful. And again, I'm in multiple leagues. I'm hyped for this week. I think I have my first draft coming up. I need to actually go through one. Mock drafts are one thing, you know what I'm saying? But the pressure and the actual seriousness that comes along with these drafts just makes me think you can never be over-prepared. Research, draft prep, all of these angles, sleepers, keepers, we've spoken about it all. You can never be too prepared because, just like on today's episode, when names start flying off the board, Steel, you got your key lined up and there's 5 guys in it, and all of a sudden you're down to 1 because 4 went straight off the board. Things can get a little hot and heavy, which, by the way, the rest of our breakdown of our categorical, Steel, we're on left wings. We got to finish up. We'll finish that up on tomorrow's episode. Tap me in there and let's get this draft going.
Yeah, that's what we got going. We got cooking for Tuesday's episode, top 5 left wingers continuation from last week. So that will be our last top 10 for positional top 10 list.
True.
And then we'll do some different, maybe banger league beauties, top 5 studs, top 5 sleepers, top 5 guys maybe to stay away from. Obviously, we got to get to our division projections for this upcoming year, best bets, bold predictions as well.
Yes.
Lots to still cover before the puck drop of that global series between the Sabres and Devils starting October 4th. So we have some time to get all of that content in before the regular season starts.
So I'm sitting in 5th in this mock draft here. Obviously, it's going to be a Pasternak, Artemi Panarin situation. The way things are ranked on Yahoo right now, McDavid, McKinnon, Kucherov, Matthews, and Pasternak. Leon Draisaitl, in terms of, the expert ranking right now on Yahoo in the draft, Leon Draisaitl's all the way at 7th, which I actually think is a bit of a mistake. I think he is a top 5 fantasy target steal, and in most leagues, I expect him to go off the board within the first 5 picks. If I can get him at the 5th, I'm going to be very, very happy. We got names flying off the board already here, Steele, and I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I'm ready to go as well. And I don't know what kind of strategy we're both trying to implement on this episode. I'm kind of going down the right of or down the path of picking the best player, my favorite player in each of those rounds. So I'm going a little bit of a different strategic
like
that I'm
going with the gut
implementing for this season. I'm going with the gut feeling of who I like, who my favorite player is, and see kind of how that turns out, because I've seen it work in the past and I've seen it not work in the past as well. So we're going to have to check that out.
So McDavid, Kucherov, McKinnon, Matthews, basically the locked in first 4. And I'm taking Leon Draisaitl at 5. And I think that's a very fair pick. I wouldn't pick you apart for taking Pasternak or Breadman. I just think now with the contract locked in, the health, he is going to have yet another big season. That Oilers team is just sensational. You're on the board, pal, at 8.
Oh, they're very good. And if I'm going with my favorite player, this might be a little bit of a reach, but I'm going with Kirill Kaprizov. I know Panarin's there. I know Makar's there. JT Miller's also my guy, but I'm a Minnesota Wild fan. I'm going with my boy. A little bit of a reach at the number 8 position. You could probably wait until the 11th or 12th pick, but I mean, favorite player right now. I love the Minnesota Wild. I'm going with it.
The Minnesota Wild are one of those teams that, honestly, look, we love Philip Gustafson. Faber on the back end is a very intriguing name. I think Matt Boldy, throw him in there. Those are got to be the 4 on the Minnesota Wild. Yeah. Boldy, Kaprizov, Brock Faber, and Philip Gustafson. This is one of those teams, Steele, and I know you can attest to it, kind of hard to put your finger on in terms of expectations, just because we know they've been looking for that second superstar in Minnesota from time. They were looking for one for a while, and they got Kaprizov. And I think you've said this at length. They go a week of looking unreal and then 2 or 3 weeks of just being average.
Yeah.
I don't know where I would project the Minnesota Wild headed into this season just in terms of the standings. However, those names we mentioned, very fantasy relevant. And Brock Faber, now, speaking of securing the bag, now that he has that in tow, he has got to be one of those players that we're kind of looking at as maybe breakout isn't the right word, but he is going to have a really big season, in my opinion.
He is. And look, this is the situation and the predicaments that we're sort of seeing now. I mean, a lot of young guys are just securing the bag right now. We just saw Dylan Guenther sign with Utah for having less than 70, 60 games in the National Hockey League for $7.1 million for 8 years. That's a lot of faith in Dylan Guenther. And we talked about it on the Utah top 5 targets for this upcoming season. And, obviously he was one of those guys to keep your eyes out for about potential breakout, getting some more opportunity. But that's putting a lot of faith and, big confidence in a guy who's played under 50 or 60 games in the National Hockey League. So we're seeing that, Brock Faber obviously played a full season last year. He was great there. And he secures the bag as well. He gets his 8-year deal or 7-year deal. But I mean, that's what we're seeing now. Sometimes it's just putting a little bit of faith in those guys instead of actually seeing it firsthand for at least a couple of years.
Hey, and look, just to get back to the draft here, I took Evan Bouchard 20th off the board. A little bit of a Steel Roden extravaganza here, taking a big D-man with a big forward on the same team. I know that's a bit of a polarizing strategy, but when you're talking about the power play points that you're going to get and how good Evan Bouchard kind of exploded last year, I'm loving that pairing. Taking him at the 20th mark, Steele, that's right in around where I expect Evan Bouchard to be flying off the board. I'm not even mad if he's a couple of picks earlier, but in terms of where I project Evan Bouchard, 20th, that's right there on the money. I'm already liking the start to my team. Let's be clear, though. All of these drafts that we have been in, there are so many options here because of how little positions, and 12 teams is 12 teams. I'm in a 16-team league, and things can get a little bit crazy. So I got a centerman, I got a D-man, I want to look to the wing. I got Kyle Connor available. Jake Gensel is a name that you and I keep talking about. and I really love him with Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov.
Yeah.
Could wait a little bit here, I think, Steele, but not very much. I'm going to take Gensel off the board there. That's the 29th pick. I would be okay to wait a little bit with Gensel, but given how good that line is going to be, speaking of power play points, the best power play in the league last year, Tampa Bay, I'm going to be taking Jake Gensel there. I really like that player.
Lots to love, and I'm up next, but let's get to that
Yes,
and
sir.
more after the break.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Steele. We got some new sponsors on today's episode, and today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. That's right. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. The easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do, you pick more or less than 2 to 6 player stat predictions and watch the winnings roll in. Download Prize Picks today and use code LOCKEDONNHL. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNHL on Prize Picks. To get 50 instantly when you play 5, you don't even need to win to receive the 50 bonus. It's guaranteed, baby. Prize Picks. Run your game. Today's episode is also brought to you by Indeed. You need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your hiring and matching platform with over 350 million global visitors, according to Indeed data, a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Listeners of our show right now get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now. Show support for the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast by saying you heard about Indeed right here on this show. Indeed.com/lockedon. You need to hire, you need Indeed.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us. Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning is when you can find our episodes. Flip, while you were reading those wonderfully put together ad reads.
Appreciate that.
I was on the clock. I was hoping to get Roman Josi as my first defenseman because that was my favorite guy. That's my favorite defenseman going into this year. And he was unfortunately taken right before me, just like I did to you last year, sewering you on those picks right before you wanted. So I went with Victor Hedman because he was the next guy in line that I really liked on the blue line. So I've got Sidney Crosby, I've got Kirill Kaprizov, and I've got Victor Hedman. Over the last couple of picks, Adam Fox, Mitch Marner, Connor Bedard, Kyle Connor, Alex Ovechkin, and Rasmus Dahlin have all been taken. So look, this is what we're doing right now. Mock draft number 4. We're getting into it. I'm drafting my favorite players in that round for strategic value is what I'm putting it as. But I'm almost back on the clock, 2 picks away. And I'm just going to continue rolling with the forwards and defensemen. I'm going to also implement the 0G strategy, not drafting.
Shout out to Apples and Genos.
Shout out to Apples and Genos, not drafting any of these players, any of these goaltenders until later. And Jason Robertson sitting here at 41, that's a little low. So he's my favorite player in this round. I can't believe he's even fallen to the 4th round right now. I've secured my second left winger, Kaprizov and Robertson. That's a deadly combo.
That's true. And what's interesting here, Sergei Bobrovsky was the first goalie off the board at 40th. That's very, very bizarre. Sergei Bobrovsky is a good goalie. He should not be the first one off the board. Look, Mikhail Sergachev, Dougie Hamilton, Josh Morrissey, Noah Dobson, my boy Miro. I'm looking at D-Men Steel. I think there's going to be some big seasons from some of these young players, and I want to load up on them. Mikhail Sergachev being one of them covers the categories. I'm taking him here. This is the 44th overall pick. Might be a little early for Sergachev, but not by much. If he can return to what he did, you just mentioned Victor Hedman. If he can return to what he did with the Tampa Bay Lightning before he got hurt, that season where he was just beast, Mikhail Sergachev at the 44th spot, that's going to be a real sneaky pick steal. So now I got Draisaitl, Gensel, Bouchard, and Sergachev. I got to be looking back up into my forward group, and I'm going to address the right wing. I don't have one. You and I have said this before. Don't overload too much on one position. This isn't rocket science. You gotta balance out your team. I know not everyone is a fantasy vet. We got some newbies up in here, and that's what hockey is for. It's for everybody. So we got to give a little bit of advice for everyone across the board. Barkov, Kempe, Verhaeghe, Joel Eriksson Ek, some very intriguing names here. Brad Marchand's up there. He came off 3 off-season surgeries. considering the peripheral coverage that I get from a player in Adrian Kempe Steele, I'm sticking to my guns on this one. I think Kempe has a very big year, and I'm going to take
Yes.
him here at the spot. That's 53rd overall. Brad Marchand next off the board, so a little bit of a comparison there.
I like Kempe at 53rd, and maybe he could have gone a little bit higher, but I think if you can get him, that's tons of value right there. You know, you still look at guys who are in this realm. Alexander Barkov still on the board. Carter Verhaeghe, your boy, still on the board. Tim Stutzla still on the board, which I'm very surprised about as well. So this is a lot of still going on. I'm back on the clock right now. Again, I'm going with one of my favorite teams, a guy who fills out the peripherals, and I love this player so much. Joel Eriksson Ek. Again, I think this is exactly where he should be going because I think he's overlooked and undervalued for what he does peripherally. But I also just love him. I love the team he plays for.
Yes,
Joel
you
Eriksson
do.
Ek fills in that second center position. I got to start looking back to the blue line as well as some right wingers. So I'll throw it back over to you while I start browsing a little bit.
Yeah, and what's interesting about a player in Kempe, right? He is dual eligibility here. He slots in under my center position. He is going to play the wing. These dual eligibilities also will become much more finite over the next couple of weeks. You got to keep your eye on these situations. Yahoo, ESPN, Fantrax, they update these quite regularly, especially as training camps start to wind down. You're coming back up on the board here, Steele. It's the 6th round, and this is now, for me, I don't personally want to wait too much longer to start taking goalies, but also if they start to fly, the elite options and the ones I'm comfortable with do become few and far between. So me personally, I don't want to wait too much longer.
Yeah.
And I might actually, in the 6th or 7th round, be fine to take my first goaltender, which I'm looking at doing.
I think that's where I am going to take my first goaltender this upcoming drafts. I mean, if you wait any longer, again, depending on what's happened in the draft, if goalies once goalies start going, they fall like dominoes. It's incredible how quickly goalies get going once the first one's taken. For me, this is where I would probably be taking, you know, a goaltender 6th or 7th round. I'm gonna wait maybe 2 more rounds just to see how it goes, but I really like this player in Dougie Hamilton. I think he's going to come back again fully healthy. Luke Hughes is out for the first 6 weeks of the season, so there's no question Dougie Hamilton's going to be running the first power play unit. I love what he's projected for as well. I think he can do a little bit more, but he takes a ton of shots. He fills out the blocks, the hits, the power play points. Obviously, I think with Jack Hughes, Timo Meier, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, that's going to be a very deadly power play in the Metropolitan. So I like Dougie Hamilton. He's going to be my second defenseman off the board.
Yeah, that Luke Hughes injury, obviously he's a young player. He's going to be back. That makes me very intrigued at what it will mean for Dougie Hamilton. Steele, this New Jersey Devils team, in my opinion, with those additions on the back end, we've been saying this at length. Markstrom, Pesce, and they also bring in Brendan Dillon into the mix of what they had up front. You combine a healthy Jack Hughes. I power ranked the Metro Division in an article earlier this week. I had the Devils all the way up at the 2nd spot, Steele, and that's ahead of some good teams. That might be a reach, and you and I will talk about all of our division breakdowns, and you can chirp me a little bit there. What I'm trying to spit out here, not very eloquently, is that Devils team I think is going to be fantasy gold, starting with Dougie Hamilton. So I love that pick. I'm going back to the wing here, Steele, and I got a guy that I'm double circling at this point in the draft, Travis Konechny. He's a shorthanded beauty. He plays on the power play. He has hits. He blocks shots. He's gritty. I really want to balance out all the categories here, Steele. You know me. I've fallen a victim of taking the players that I like too much, one style of player, and I'm overloaded in one category. I need PIMs. I want blocks. I want hits. Travis Konechny is one of those guys that does a little bit of everything, and I'll take it.
Yeah, that's a very, very good pick. Again, like you said, dual eligibility. I'm looking towards the right side right now. A couple guys that I had in the queue were taken. Clayton Keller, Matt Barzell were just off the board. They were taken off the queue. Tage Thompson, I mean, fallen all the way down to the 7th round. Interesting. He's got dual eligibility as well. The center right wing position. I mean, this is also a guy who has 35 plus goal scoring ability. He has the goal scoring touch. He's going to fill out the peripherals, over 250 shots, over 70 hits. And again, he's going to get his own, I think, 70 points. We know this is a gold mine of a team with the Buffalo Sabres. And we'll continue all of that and more once we come back from break. Tage Thompson, Buffalo Sabres, rest of this draft. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. I mean, that is a tremendous deal. You should take them up on that. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us. Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning is when you can find our episodes. We really do appreciate it. So thank you so much for all of the love, all of the support, and everyone who wants to participate in this listener league this upcoming year. Make sure, again, if you received an email, join the league as soon as possible so we can get things underway. We really do appreciate that.
Big time. I just had exactly what I was explaining earlier. I wanted Mo Seider here. I'm sitting at the 92nd pick in the draft. We're in the 8th round. I wanted to go back to my blue line, one that already included Bouchard and Sergachev. Mo Seider, if he can maintain a 50-point, 55-point level, which I think he's very capable of, he's a triple-digit peripheral category beast. Block shots, hits. He mixes it up. He just got the bag. Speaking of which, Mo Seider is a player steal that I have my eyes all over this season. We like what's going on in D-Town. He was a guy that I wanted. I went with Vince Dunn instead. And that's another intriguing name that we haven't spoken about very much. The peripherals in terms of like banger leagues isn't jumping off the page. But Vince Dunn is one of those players. When I see him skate with that biscuit on the blue line steal, I almost think he might be able to play forward. That's how offensively gifted he is. I like the player. I don't know what's going on in Seattle this year. Much like Minnesota, hard for me to put my finger on the Seattle Kraken. However, I like Vince Dunn. Here in the 9th round, I still think that's still sneaky. He should go a little higher, but not too much. 7th, 8th round is where I would have projected him. Here in the 9th, I'm comfortable with it. I am going to go back to the right wing position, but hit me with your take on Vince Dunn.
Yeah, I mean, the Seattle Kraken are the Seattle Kraken are a team that, obviously they came in, struggled year 1, they get into year 2, and they kind of just break out. They make the playoffs. They have a good run. Vince Dunn has a breakout season. A lot of guys had breakout seasons. Obviously, Jared McCann, huge fan of the goal scoring touch that he brings to the game. I just don't know if Vince Dunn, obviously he's the guy for them. I just don't know if he can be a guy that you can depend on consistently.
Little risky
in your fantasy leagues, a little bit riskier, but if you're going to get him at this point in the draft, I'm totally fine with it. I'm looking at my first goaltender, and I'm looking at Thatcher Demko. I know the injury concern is there, but you're getting a decent amount of value in the 9th round right now, close to the 10th round. I mean, if he comes back, I think he's going to be an absolute stud. Obviously, the injury concern and that rare, we were talking about the rare muscle injury that we were discussing the other day. Obviously, that has to scare you a little bit, but I think at that point, I'm gonna just, he was my favorite goalie that was left on the board right here, and I'm going with a little bit of a shot in the dark, hoping that he comes back fully healthy. Obviously not fully healthy, but healthy enough to get by.
Speaking of hard to put your finger on, that goaltender situation in Vancouver is murky at best, clear as mud kind of a situation. That's one we're going to have to closely monitor, Steele, over these next few weeks. They could be in trouble if Shelovs isn't able to step in and back him up like he did in the playoffs very nicely, I would say. Also here, I just want to recap my team quickly. Draisaitl and Kempe, Gensel, Konechny, Bouchard, Sergachev, and Dunn on the back end. Honestly, the only pick that I'm a little uncertain of on my whole team is Vince Dunn. After that, I just went with my second goaltender. I'm loving my goaltenders, and here we go. I understand the 0G is a strategy to employ. Stuart Skinner and Linus Olmark, I'm loving my goaltenders there, and I'm feeling very comfortable with those two.
Yeah, those are great picks right there.
Oh, you took
Um,
the Brinkat. Nice pick, Steele.
yeah, I
That
mean,
was
he was
next in
left
my
there.
queue.
He was left there. And so I was like, I need to get my next right winger. He was my favorite right winger left on the board. And in that round right now, I'm surprised he actually fell all the way to the 10th.
Yeah.
But he has that dual eligibility. I'm actually really liking this team I've put together. Obviously, a little bit of a sore spot in that goalie department, but I've got
That's what's gonna happen, yeah.
Joel Eriksson, Kaprizov, Robertson, Thompson, DeBrincat, Hedman, Hamilton, Uyghur, and Demko. That's a very stud-started team right there,
Yeah.
and I am very
I
happy
like
about
your
how that's
blue
turned
line. I
out
like
so
your
far.
blue line there.
Blue line's been put together way better than the other first 3 mock drafts I've done so far. So
There
we're
you
gonna
go.
keep the ball rolling. I'm looking at my next defenseman and my goalies to fill
Yep.
out the full team here. But yeah, this has been a pretty decent draft, if I say so myself. I'm very happy with the team I've put together. But again, I mean, I like your goalies, Linus Allmark, Stuart Skinner. I think those are going to be tremendous guys. I think, again, when you look at some of the goalies still left on the board right now, I mean, Binnington's still out there. Darcy Kemper, who I think could, maybe getting overlooked a little bit. Connor
agree.
Ingram with Utah, Charlie Lindgren, Philip Gustafson, Cam Talbot. Those are the next 5 guys in line that I would be looking at for that second goalie for me.
Logan Thompson is also an interesting name. Philip Gustafson is another name that I would throw out there in terms of serviceable goaltenders, but then it falls off very quickly. And look, I don't think you and I need to get to our bench spots on today's episode. I got a D-man left. I got a right winger left. I'm going to round out my D-men next deal. I'm on the board here. It's going to be the 11th round, 125th pick, roughly what I'm looking at here in terms of D-men left. Drew Doughty, John Carlson, Brady Shea, your boy, Chris Letang, Jacob Chikrin, which is a very polarizing fantasy name.
Yeah.
The Ottawa Senators paid a first and 2 second-round picks to basically send Jacob Chikrin away for Nick Jensen. That might be a blow-up in their face if Washington puts it together like we think they might, Steele. And look, nothing against Nick Jensen, but that would be very Jacob Chikrin-esque to finally piece it together, Steele, this year in Washington. However, I'm probably going to lean towards a player in John Carlson, who we like, Drew Doughty. These are the Wiley vet situation. Even Chris Letang, who fills out those peripherals very nicely. They're not sexy names, Steele, but all of those are reliable ones. And even a guy like Noah Hannafin, I would be fine with taking here any of those guys to fill out my blue line, honestly. Doughty, Carlson, Hannafin, Letang. I feel like those are all perfect 11th round picks to fill out your draft. I'm going to go with your boy, John Carlson, because I do think him playing with Chikrin, and I do think that's how it's lining up right now, that could be a dangerous little combo on the power play, and I know how you feel about John Carlson.
Yeah, you might have seen him in my queue right there. And my next defenseman also just got taken. Mike Matheson was the next guy in line. Oh, my goodness. I don't know what I'm going to do now. Jacob Chikrin's there. Noah Hannafin. I like Hannafin. I like Brady Shea. Honestly, I think Brady Shea has a little bit more upside.
Stick to your guns.
Yeah, I'm going with Brady Shea, my boy over here. He's going to fill in that 4th defensive spot. But, hey, that's what happens in fantasy leagues. You took John Carlson. Right after that, Mike Matheson was next. Boom. And I was left there looking a little bit dumb in the face. So
not just hungover either.
Not just hungover, but I went with Brady Shea, a guy who I know is going to fill out the peripherals. I think he's got great opportunity playing alongside Roman Josi. And I mean, he's, again, the offensive upside between Carolina and Nashville. I think with the way Nashville has been put together now, there's so much potential for an offensive burst for a guy like Brady Shea, who can also play tremendously in the defensive zone.
Totally. We missed one of my picks. I took Alex Tuch as my my first right winger. I'm buying into the bounce back in Buffalo. They are going to be a much better team this year. Far too much good young talent at every position. They were a top 5 offensive team only 2 years ago. So Alex Tuch is going to be, just like you saw with Tage Thompson slide, I'm fine with Alex Tuch, a very good player that I've spoken about on this podcast at length. He's a smart player. He's a leader, and he also chips in across the board in terms of categorical coverage. Yeah. And I'm going to stick to my guns here on this next pick because I really don't think he's going to be taken. Dual eligibility as well. Plays with edge, almost 100 hits last year. Yeah, it's my boy Drizzy Drake Batherson, and I'm going to take him once again, Steele. I'm buying into these good teams on the come up. Ottawa,
Yeah.
Buffalo, all of these squads, the trio of Gensel, Point, and Kucherov. Are all of the angles going to play out? Of course not. But all of them make sense. And right now, with all of the speculation, projections, I'm just going to have to stick to the ones that I've been reading into the most. And it's fantasy. It's not
Mhm.
always going to pan out. However, when you do your research and you do stick to your guns, just like you've done on today's mock draft, like I have, it should eventually pan out for you.
Yeah.
He will be the last player off the board for me, Steele, and I'll wrap up my team then. Draisaitl, Kempe, Gensel, Konechny, Tuck, Batherson, Bouchard, Sergachev, Dunn, and Carlson on the back end, and my goalies Skinner and Allmark. Let us know in the comments what you think about our teams, and stay tuned for the rest of this week's content.
Yeah, my last pick, I went with a guy who I have confidence in, who I think has been, again, underrated throughout his entire NHL career to fill out that last goalie position. Cam Talbot was that second goaltender off the board. There were guys like Connor Ingram, Logan Thompson, Samsonov, Gustafson even as well. But I like Cam Talbot. I think he's been overlooked. And I like the Detroit. I like the look of the Detroit Red Wings going into this season as well. So real quick, Crosby, Eriksson Ek, Kaprizov, Robertson, Thompson, DeBrincat, Hedman, Hamilton, Uyghur, Brady Shea, Thatcher Demko, and Cam Talbot makes up my roster right there. And I'm actually pretty happy with how the way that's turned out. A lot of offensive studs, guys who fill out the peripheral categories. And then if Thatcher Demko comes back healthy, he's a stud in the crease as well. So that is the Mock Draft Monday special, number 4, coming at you this week. Mock drafts and actual drafts coming in later this week. So make sure to stay tuned in for that as well. We couldn't be more excited. Again, make sure you're joining the league if you got a link or if you got an acceptance. Please accept that over there. We really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. Make sure you go check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link in the description below, so you don't have to go searching for it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Again, from both Flip and I, we really do appreciate it. We wish you good luck with all your bets this fall, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.